This is HOA Care and Patrol. It started with snow and ended with a board meltdown. I am standing in my driveway in Burlington, Vermont at 7 in the morning, and a middle-aged woman in a gray puffer coat is shouting at me about a snow pile. She is holding a clipboard with a violation notice and jabbing her finger toward the curb. You are in direct violation of Section 4.3, Snow and Ice Storage. That pile is too close to the street, and it is creating a hazard. I am assessing a $50 fine effective immediately, and if you do not move it by noon, it is another $50 daily. I blink at her through the cold air. I moved into this townhouse in the Spruce and Snow Terrace Association 3 weeks ago. I took a job managing a car rental lot because I could not afford to miss shifts, and the last thing I need is an HOA war, but here we are. The woman does not wait for me to respond. She flips a page on her clipboard and keeps going. I am Joan Wilson, treasurer of the association, and I have all day, and so does my fine meter. I glance at the snow pile. It is 2 feet from the curb, maybe 3. The plow pushed most of it there. I shoveled a path to my door and salted the steps. I did everything the welcome packet said to do. I take a breath and try to keep my voice calm. I shoveled yesterday. The plow came through last night and pushed more snow onto my side. I cannot control where the city plow dumps it. Joan shakes her head like I just insulted her family. The city plow is not my problem. Your property line is my problem. You signed the covenant. You agreed to maintain a clean and safe appearance. That pile is unsightly, and it is blocking sight lines for drivers. I look at the pile again. It is not blocking anything. The street is wide, and the pile is barely above knee height. But Joan is already writing on her clipboard. She tears off a yellow carbon copy and holds it out to me. This is your first notice. You have until noon to relocate the snow to an approved area, which is behind your unit, out of sight from the street. If I come back and it is still here, the fine doubles. She turns and walks toward a red sedan parked 2 houses down. I stand there, holding the yellow paper, frost forming on my breath, wondering what I just stepped into. I go inside and read the notice. Section 4.3 is about storage of seasonal items, not snow. The language is vague enough that Joan is stretching it to cover snow piles, and the fine schedule is buried in an appendix I never got with my closing documents. I pull out my phone and open the HOA portal to file an appeal. The website loads, then throws an error. Portal maintenance. Please try again later. I refresh 3 times. Same message. I call the management company. The line rings 15 times before going to voicemail. I leave a message explaining the situation and asking for a copy of the full covenant and the appeal process. Then, I get dressed for work. At the rental lot, I spend the morning dealing with a fleet truck that will not start and 2 customers who are angry about salt stains on their seats. I check my phone during my break. No callback from management. No email. I try the portal again. Still down. I call the main office again, and this time I get a receptionist who tells me the property manager is out until next week, and the portal has been down for 2 days. I ask how I am supposed to file an appeal if the portal is down. She says I can mail a letter to the management office, but it has to be postmarked within 5 business days of the notice. I hang up and look at the clock. It is 11:30. I have 30 minutes before Joan comes back to check the pile. I drive home on my lunch break. The pile is still there, exactly where the plow left it. I grab the shovel and start moving snow toward the back of my unit. It takes 20 minutes, and I am sweating under my jacket by the time I finish. The area behind my unit is a narrow strip of grass between my patio and the fence. I pile the snow there, then shovel a path back to the driveway. When I am done, the front curb is clear, except for a thin layer of ice the city left. I check the time. It is 5 minutes past noon. I am about to head back to work when Joan pulls up in her red sedan. She gets out, walks to my curb, and looks at the spot where the pile used to be. Then she looks at me. "You moved it. Good. But you are late. It is 12:05. The fine stands, and now you owe another $50 for failure to comply within the deadline." She writes another notice and hands it to me. I stare at the paper. I moved the snow. You said noon. I was 5 minutes late because I had to shovel it during my lunch break. Joan crosses her arms. The deadline was noon. Not 12:05, not 12:01. Noon. You agreed to the terms. The fine is enforceable. She gets back in her car and drives off. I go back to work and spend the afternoon fuming. By the time I get home that evening, there is a certified mail slip in my mailbox. I drive to the post office the next morning before my shift and pick up the envelope. Inside is a formal demand letter from the Spruce and Snow Terrace Association. It lists the two $50 fines and adds a $25 administrative fee for processing the violation. The letter is signed by Joan Wilson, treasurer, and it includes a payment deadline of 14 days. If I do not pay, the letter says, the association will place a lien on my property and pursue collection through small claims court. I read that line 3 times. I just moved in. I am waiting on a refinance approval, and any lien threat over winter fees could derail it. The lender already told me they would pull out if there are any outstanding disputes or liens on the title. I cannot let this spiral. I call an attorney that afternoon. The consult costs me $200 and 15 minutes of my time. The attorney listens to the story and tells me the HOA is within its rights to enforce covenants, but the fine schedule has to be published and accessible, and the appeal process has to be clearly outlined. If the portal was down and I could not file an appeal, that is a procedural problem. He tells me to document everything, save all the notices, take photos of the snow pile in the area behind my unit, and file a written appeal by certified mail to both the management company and the HOA board. He also tells me to check my closing documents for the full covenant and any amendments. I thank him and hang up. Then I spend the evening digging through my files. The covenant I got at closing is 30 pages long, but it is missing 2 appendices. Appendix C is the fine schedule Joan keeps referencing. Appendix D is the appeal and hearing process. Neither one was included in my packet. I send an email to my real estate agent asking for copies. She replies the next morning and says she will reach out to the title company. In the meantime, I write a formal appeal letter. I explain that the snow pile was caused by the city plow, that I moved it as soon as I was able, and that the 5-minute delay was due to work obligations. I explain that the portal was down and I had no way to file an appeal electronically. I request a hearing and a waiver of the fines. I print 2 copies, one for the management company and one for the HOA board. I take them to the post office and send them certified mail with return receipt. 2 days later, Joan shows up at my door again. This time, she has a tape measure. She unfolds it and stretches it across the path I shoveled from my front door to the driveway. The path is 36 inches wide. She writes the measurement on her clipboard. Section 2.7 requires all pedestrian pathways to be a minimum of 48 inches wide for accessibility compliance. Your path is 12 inches too narrow. That is another $50 fine. I stare at her. I shoveled the path. It is wide enough to walk through. No one has complained. Joan clicks her pen. The rule does not say wide enough to walk through. It says 48 inches minimum. You are in violation. She hands me another yellow notice and walks back to her car. I stand there with the tape measure still lying across the snow, watching her drive away. That night, I get a call from my neighbor, a guy named Eric, who lives 3 units down. He saw Joan at my place earlier and wanted to give me a heads up. He tells me Joan has been doing this to people all winter. She picks 1 or 2 units every month and hammers them with violations until they either pay up or move out. Last month, she went after a couple for having a grill cover with snow on it. She claimed it was unsightly storage and fined them $300 before they gave up and paid. Eric says the HOA has been a nightmare since Joan took over as treasurer 2 years ago. She rewrites the rules to fit whatever she wants to target, and the board goes along with it because half of them are scared of her and the other half do not care. He tells me to watch my back and keep records of everything. Then he mentions something else. A few weeks ago, he caught Joan on his doorbell camera walking around my property at night, right after I moved in. He did not think much of it at the time, but now he is wondering if she was scoping out things to cite me for. He offers to send me the footage. I tell him yes, send it, and I thank him for the warning. The next morning, I check my mail and find another certified letter. This one is not from the HOA. It is from a law firm in Burlington. The letter informs me that Joan Wilson, on behalf of the Spruce and Snow Terrace Association, is filing a small claims action against me for unpaid fines totaling $200, plus interest and court costs. The hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from now, on a Tuesday morning at 9. I read the letter twice, then sit down on my couch and try not to panic. I cannot afford to take time off work for a courthouse hearing, and I definitely cannot afford a lien on my property while my refinance is pending. But Joan is not giving me a choice. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA drama and neighbor battles. I call the attorney again. This time, the consult costs me another $200. He tells me small claims is designed to be accessible, so I can represent myself, but I need to bring evidence. He tells me to print out the doorbell footage Eric sent me, bring copies of all the notices and letters, bring photos of the snow pile and the path, and bring a copy of the incomplete covenant I got at closing. He also tells me to file a counterclaim for harassment and requests that the court order the HOA to provide the missing appendices and clarify the appeal process. I spend the weekend preparing. Eric sends me the video file. I watch it 3 times. The timestamp shows Joan walking around my front yard at 11:30 at night, 2 days after I moved in. She is holding a flashlight and looking at my patio, my driveway, and the area near the curb. She is not delivering a notice. She is not checking for an emergency. She is scouting. I print screenshots from the video and add them to my evidence folder. Then I take new photos of the current state of my property. The snow pile is gone. The path is shoveled and salted. There is no hazard, no obstruction, nothing that would justify the fines Joan piled on. I also pull up the HOA bylaws from the state filing database and compare them to the covenant I got at closing. The bylaws say fines can only be assessed after a hearing and a written finding of violation. Joan skipped that step. She went straight to the fines and the demand letters. That is a procedural violation, and I have it in writing. On Monday, I get another surprise. My insurance agent calls and tells me the carrier is threatening to cancel my homeowner's policy. Apparently, the HOA filed a complaint with the insurance company claiming I am creating a liability hazard with improper snow removal. The complaint is vague and does not cite any specific incident, but the carrier is treating it as a red flag. My agent tells me I need to resolve the HOA dispute immediately, or they will non-renew my policy at the end of the term, which is in 6 weeks. I hang up and add that to my evidence folder. Joan is not just fining me. She is trying to destroy my ability to own the property. The day of the small claims hearing arrives. I take the morning off work and drive to the courthouse. The hallway outside the courtroom is narrow and crowded. I am standing near the bench, reviewing my notes, when Joan appears. She is wearing the same gray puffer coat, and she has a leather binder under her arm. She sees me and walks over. She does not say hello. She just stands there, staring, waiting for me to acknowledge her. I do not. I keep reading my notes. Finally, she speaks. You know you are going to lose, right? The covenant is clear. You violated multiple sections. The fines are legitimate. I look up at her. The covenant I got at closing is missing 2 appendices. I never got the fine schedule. I never got the appeal process. You skipped the hearing requirement in the bylaws. You went straight to fines and threats. That is not enforcement. That is harassment. Joan narrows her eyes. I do not need to justify the process to you. The board approved everything I did. You signed the covenant. You agreed to follow the rules. I did not mention my evidence yet, because I wanted her to repeat the story first. I let her keep talking. She tells me the board will back her up, that the management company has copies of everything, that I am wasting everyone's time. She says I should have just paid the fines and moved on. Then she leans in a little closer and says the line I have been waiting for. I can fine you daily until the snow melts and you cry. I do not react. I just let her say it again, louder this time, right there in the courthouse hallway. A deputy standing near the courtroom door glances over. Joan does not notice. She keeps going, telling me how I am going to lose my refinance, how the lien will tank my credit, how she has done this to 12 people and won every time. Then she turns and walks into the courtroom. Inside the courtroom, the judge calls our case. Joan goes first. She stands at the plaintiff table and presents her binder. She explains that I violated the snow storage rule, the pathway width rule, and failed to comply with multiple deadlines. She shows the judge copies of the notices she gave me and the demand letter. She says the fines are clearly outlined in the covenant and that I had every opportunity to appeal but chose not to. The judge listens, then asks her if I was provided with the full covenant at closing. Joan hesitates. She says yes, of course. The judge asks her if she has proof. Joan flips through her binder and pulls out a document. She hands it to the judge. The judge reads it, then looks at me. Do you have a copy of the covenant you received at closing? I stand and hand the judge my folder. I explain that my covenant is missing appendices C and D. I show the judge the table of contents, which lists both appendices, and then I show the judge the document itself, which ends abruptly after Appendix B. The judge compares the 2 documents. Joan tries to interrupt. She says the missing appendices are available on the portal. The judge cuts her off. Was the portal accessible when the plaintiff received these notices? I speak up. No, Your Honor. The portal was down for at least 4 days. I tried to access it multiple times, and I have screenshots showing the error message. I also called the management company and left messages. No one responded until after the fines were already assessed. The judge looks at Joan. Did you provide the defendant with a physical copy of the fine schedule and the appeal process? Joan shifts her weight. The information is in the covenant. He signed it. The judge raises an eyebrow. That is not what I asked. Did you provide him with the appendices he is missing? Joan does not answer. The judge makes a note. Then the judge asks me if I have any other evidence. I pull out the doorbell footage screenshots. I explain that my neighbor caught Joan on camera walking around my property at night, 2 days after I moved in, before any of the violations occurred. I hand the screenshots to the judge. The judge looks at them, then looks at Joan. What were you doing on the defendant's property at 11:30 at night? Joan stammers. I was conducting a routine inspection. The judge asks if routine inspections are outlined in the covenant. Joan says yes. The judge asks me if I was notified of the inspection. I say no. The judge makes another note. Then I pull out the final piece of evidence. It is a copy of the HOA bylaws, pulled from the state filing database. I explain that the bylaws require a hearing and a written finding before any fines can be assessed. I point to the section, highlighted in yellow, and I hand it to the judge. The judge reads it, then looks at Joan. Did you hold a hearing before assessing these fines? Joan says the board reviewed the violations at the monthly meeting. The judge asks if I was notified of the meeting or given an opportunity to present my side. Joan says I could have filed an appeal. The judge asks how I was supposed to file an appeal if the portal was down and I did not have the appeal process document. Joan does not answer. The judge closes the binder and leans back. I am dismissing the plaintiff's claims. The fines were assessed without proper notice, without access to the full covenant, and without the required hearing process. The defendant is not liable for any of the amounts claimed. Furthermore, I am ordering the Homeowners Association to provide the defendant with complete copies of all governing documents, including the missing appendices, within 7 business days. I am also ordering the association to refund any amounts the defendant has already paid, if applicable. The judge pauses. And I am awarding the defendant court costs. Joan's face goes red. She starts to argue, but the judge cuts her off. This hearing is concluded. Next case. Joan gathers her binder and walks out of the courtroom. I follow a few minutes later, carrying my folder. Outside in the hallway, Eric is waiting. He saw the whole thing from the gallery. He grins and claps me on the shoulder. You crushed her. I shake my head. It is not over. She is going to come after me again. Eric shrugs. Maybe. But now you have a court order. If she tries anything, you have proof she is ignoring it. We walk out of the courthouse together. The snow is falling again, light and steady. I get in my car and drive back to work. The next week, I get a certified letter from the management company. Inside is a full copy of the covenant, including appendices C and D. There is also a letter from the board president, apologizing for the confusion and confirming that all fines have been waived. The letter does not mention Joan by name, but it says the board is reviewing its enforcement procedures to ensure compliance with state law. I read the letter twice, then file it with the rest of my evidence. I think that is the end of it. I am wrong. 2 days later, I am at the grocery store after work, loading bags into my car in the parking lot. It is snowing again, and the lot is slushy and crowded. I close the trunk and turn around, and Joan is standing there. She is holding her phone, filming me. She does not say anything at first. She just stands there, pointing the phone at me, waiting. I freeze. "What are you doing?" She smirks. "I am documenting your harassment. You filed a counterclaim. You defamed me in court. You accused me of trespassing. I am gathering evidence for my attorney." I look around. There are other shoppers nearby, loading their cars, walking past. Some of them are staring. I take a breath and try to stay calm. "I did not defame you. I presented evidence. The judge dismissed your claims. You lost." Joan steps closer. "You think you won? You embarrassed me in front of the board. You cost the association money. You made me look incompetent. I am not done with you." She is still filming. I can see my reflection in her phone screen. I do not move. I do not say anything. I just wait. Finally, Joan lowers the phone. She leans in and says it again, quieter this time. "I can fine you daily until the snow melts and you cry." Then she turns and walks away, disappearing between the rows of parked cars. I get in my car and sit there for a minute, trying to process what just happened. Then I pull out my own phone and call Eric. I tell him what Joan did. He tells me to file a police report. I drive to the station and spend 20 minutes explaining the situation to an officer. The officer takes notes and tells me it is not technically illegal for Joan to film me in a public place, but the pattern of behavior could qualify as harassment if it continues. He gives me a case number and tells me to call back if she contacts me again. I thank him and leave. On the way home, I stop at the post office and check my mailbox. There is another certified letter waiting. I sign for it and open it in the parking lot. It is from a law firm in Burlington, but not the same one Joan used for small claims. This letter informs me that Joan Wilson is filing a civil suit against me for defamation, claiming I made false statements in court that damaged her reputation. The letter demands a retraction and a public apology, plus $5,000 in damages. If I do not comply within 10 days, the suit will proceed. I sit in my car, staring at the letter, and I realize Joan is not trying to win anymore. She is trying to bury me in legal fees and stress until I give up and move out. I call the attorney again. This time, I do not schedule a consult. I just tell him what is happening and ask for advice. He listens, then tells me Joan's defamation claim is frivolous. Truth is an absolute defense, and everything I said in court was backed by evidence. He says I should file a motion to dismiss and request sanctions for filing a baseless suit. He also says I should consider filing a restraining order if Joan continues to contact me or show up at my home. The call costs me another $100. I hang up and drive home. That night, I sit at my kitchen table and write out a timeline of everything that has happened. The first notice about the snow pile. The second notice about the pathway width. The small claims filing. The insurance complaint. The grocery store confrontation. The defamation threat. I realize Joan has been escalating in steps, testing how far she can push before I break. But she made a mistake. She kept talking. She repeated her threat twice, once in the courthouse hallway and once in the grocery store parking lot. I have witnesses for the first one. I have my own testimony for the second. And I have the doorbell footage showing she was targeting me from the start. I pull out the bylaws again and read through the enforcement section one more time. Then I see it. Section 8.4. Any board member found to be abusing their authority or acting outside the scope of their duties may be removed by a 2/3 vote of the membership at a special meeting. I checked the membership roster. There are 42 units in the association. I need 28 votes to remove Joan. I do not know if I can get that many, but I have to try. The next morning, I print flyers explaining what happened. I keep it factual. I list the court order, the missing appendices, the procedural violations, and the ongoing harassment. I include my contact information and a request for anyone else who has been targeted by Joan to reach out. I walk the neighborhood that weekend and leave a flyer in every mailbox. By Monday, I have 12 emails. By Wednesday, I have 23. People are angry. Some of them paid fines they should not have. Some of them got threatened with liens. One couple was told their deck furniture was a fire hazard and fined $200. Another guy was cited for parking his own car in his own driveway because Joan said it was blocking the sightline from the street. Every story is different, but the pattern is the same. Joan picks a target, finds a vague rule, and hammers them until they pay or leave. I organize a meeting. We rent a conference room at the library and invite everyone who responded. 18 people show up. We spend 2 hours going through our stories and comparing evidence. By the end of the meeting, we have enough votes to call a special membership meeting and propose Joan's removal. We draft a petition and file it with the board president. The bylaws require the board to schedule the meeting within 30 days. The board president calls me 2 days later. He sounds tired. He tells me the board is aware of the situation and they are looking into it. He also tells me Joan has resigned as treasurer, effective immediately. I ask if she is still on the board. He says no. She resigned from the board entirely. He says the association is hiring a new management company, and they are going to rewrite the enforcement policy to include clear procedures, required hearings, and an independent appeals process. He apologizes for what happened and asks if I am willing to drop the defamation suit. I tell him I never filed one. Joan threatened to sue me, not the other way around. He pauses, then thanks me and hangs up. The next week, I get an email from the new management company. They introduce themselves and confirm that all fines against my property have been formally waived and removed from the account. They also confirm that the HOA is adopting a new enforcement policy that requires written notice, a 10-day response period, a hearing before any fines are assessed, and a clear appeals process with neutral review. The email includes a draft of the policy and asks for feedback. I read through it. It is not perfect, but it is a massive improvement. I send back a few suggestions and thank them for reaching out. A week later, Eric texts me. He says Joan is moving out. Her unit is listed for sale. I do not reply. I just feel a strange sense of relief. It is not revenge. It is not even justice, really. It is just the end of something that should never have started. But Joan is not done. 2 days before the special membership meeting is supposed to happen, I get a notice that Joan has filed an emergency injunction to stop the meeting. She claims the petition was invalid because it did not follow the proper procedure. The hearing is scheduled for the same day as the membership meeting at 8 in the morning. I call the attorney one more time. He tells me to show up with copies of the bylaws and the petition. He says the injunction is a stall tactic and the judge will probably deny it, but I need to be there to argue my side. The morning of the hearing, I drive to the courthouse. It is the same hallway, the same courtroom, the the same deputy standing by the door. Joan is already there, sitting on the bench with her leather binder. She does not look at me. The judge calls the case. Joan stands and argues that the petition was filed improperly because it did not include a list of specific charges against her. She says the bylaws require that. The judge asks to see the bylaws. I hand over my copy, with the relevant section highlighted. Section 8.4 does not mention specific charges. It just says any board member found to be abusing their authority may be removed by a 2/3 vote. The judge reads it, then looks at Joan. Where does it say the petition must include specific charges? Joan flips through her binder. She pulls out a different document, something labeled Internal Procedures. She says the board adopted this procedure 3 years ago. The judge asks if the procedure was ever filed with the state or included in the covenant. Joan says no. The judge closes the binder. Internal procedures that contradict the bylaws are not enforceable. The injunction is denied. The membership meeting can proceed. Joan stands there for a moment, then picks up her binder and walks out. I thank the judge and leave. Outside, Eric is waiting again. He drove over to support me. We walk to the parking lot together. He asks if I am going to the membership meeting tonight. I tell him yes. He says he will be there too. That evening, the special membership meeting is held in the community center. 31 people show up. The board president opens the meeting and explains the petition. He reads the section of the bylaws, then opens the floor for discussion. 3 people speak in favor of removing Joan. They talk about the fines, the harassment, the lack of process. One person speaks against it, saying we should give Joan a chance to defend herself. The board president points out that Joan resigned 2 weeks ago and is no longer a board member, so the removal vote is technically moot. But he says we can still vote to formally censure her conduct and adopt the new enforcement policy to prevent it from happening again. Someone makes a motion. Someone seconds it. The vote is unanimous. 31 in favor, 0 against. The board president thanks everyone and says the new policy will be sent to all members within the week. After the meeting, I stay to talk with a few of the other people who were targeted. We exchange numbers and agree to keep in touch. One woman tells me she is planning to run for the board next year. She wants to make sure this never happens again. I tell her I will vote for her. On my way out, I stop by the bulletin board in the community center lobby. Someone has posted a flyer about the new enforcement policy. It includes a section titled Appeal Process, with clear steps and timelines. I take a photo of it and send it to my attorney. He replies a few minutes later, "Looks good. Nice work." The next morning, I wake up to an email from my mortgage lender. The refinance has been approved. The title is clear. There are no liens, no disputes, no red flags. Closing is scheduled for 2 weeks from now. I sit at my kitchen table and read the email 3 times. Then I close my laptop and look out the window. The snow is still falling, light and steady, covering the driveway and the curb. But this time, I am not worried about where to put it. A few days later, I am checking my mail at the USPS cluster box near the edge of the neighborhood. It is late afternoon, overcast, and the snow is starting to stick again. I unlock my box and pull out a stack of catalogs and bills. I am about to walk back to my car when I hear a voice behind me. "You think you won." I turn around. Joan is standing there, blocking the narrow path between the mailboxes and the curb. She is holding a clipboard again, but this time there is no HOA letterhead. She is just holding it like a prop. Her face is tight and angry. You got me removed. You turned everyone against me. You ruined my reputation. I take a step back. I did not ruin your reputation. You did that yourself. Joan shakes her head. No. You lied in court. You manipulated people. You made me look like a monster. I take a breath. I presented evidence. The judge agreed with me. You lost because you broke the rules. Joan's voice gets louder. I was enforcing the covenant. I was doing my job. You were too lazy to follow the rules, so you blamed me. She steps closer, jabbing the clipboard toward me. I can fine you daily until the snow melts and you cry. She says it again, the exact same line, and this time a sheriff's deputy walking his patrol route hears it. He stops at the curb and looks at Joan. Ma'am, step back. Joan turns and sees the deputy. She freezes. The deputy walks over. Is there a problem here? I explain that Joan is the former HOA treasurer, and she has been harassing me for months. I mention the court case, the injunction, the grocery store confrontation. The deputy asks Joan for her ID. She hands it over, reluctantly. He checks it, then hands it back. Ma'am, you need to leave this man alone. If he files a complaint, you could be charged with harassment. Do you understand? Joan nods. Silent. The deputy looks at me. Do you want to file a report? I think about it. Then I say yes. The deputy pulls out a notebook and takes down my information. He tells Joan to stay away from me and away from my property. If she contacts me again, he says, there will be consequences. Joan stands there, holding her clipboard, her face red. Then she turns and walks to her car, parked 2 rows away. The deputy watches her leave, then hands me a case number. Call us if she bothers you again. I thank him and walk back to my car. A week later, I get a call from the board president. He tells me the HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted to freeze all enforcement actions pending a full rewrite of the enforcement policy. He says they are also reviewing every fine Joan assessed over the past 2 years and refunding anyone who paid under questionable circumstances. He asks if I would be willing to serve on the policy committee. I think about it for a moment, then say yes. He thanks me and says the first meeting is next month. That same day, I get a letter from the management company. It includes a formal written warning issued to Joan Wilson for harassment behavior, effective immediately. The letter says any further contact with members outside of official HOA business will result in legal action. I file the letter with the rest of my evidence. 2 weeks later, Joan's unit sells. I see the sold sign go up on a Saturday morning. I do not feel anything. I just keep shoveling my driveway, salting the steps, and going to work. The snow keeps falling. The plows keep pushing it to the curb. But now I know what to do. I know my rights. I know the process. And I know I am not alone. The policy committee meets for the first time in March. We spend 3 hours going through the draft enforcement policy line by line. We add requirements for photographic evidence, written findings, and neutral third-party review. We add a clause that says any board member who violates the policy is subject to immediate removal. We add a section on harassment and retaliation, with clear penalties. By the end of the meeting, we have a document that is twice as long as the original and 10 times more fair. The board president says he will present it to the full board at the next meeting. In April, the new policy is adopted. It passes with a unanimous vote. The management company sends out copies to every member, along with a letter apologizing for the failures of the previous system. I read the letter and the policy, then file them both. I do not need them anymore, but I keep them, just in case. By May, the snow is gone. The curbs are clear. The driveways are dry. The HOA is quiet. I get my mail without incident. I go to work without stress. I sleep through the night. It is not dramatic. It is just normal. And that is enough. One afternoon, I run into Eric at the grocery store. He is loading his cart with cases of soda, getting ready for a cookout. He sees me and waves. How is it going? I tell him it is good. No more drama. No more notices. No more Joan. Eric grins. I heard she moved to Manchester. Someone said she is already complaining about her new HOA. I laugh. Of course she is. Eric shakes his head. Some people never learn. We talk for a few more minutes, then say goodbye. I finish my shopping and head home. That night, I sit on my patio with a cold drink, looking out at the neighborhood. The sky is clear. The air is warm. The grass is green. Everything is quiet. I think about the past few months, the stress and the fear and the anger. I think about the courthouse hallways and the certified letters and the clipboard Joan always carried. I think about the moment she said, "I can fine you daily until the snow melts and you cry," and how it came back to bite her when the deputy heard it at the mailbox. I think about the policy we wrote, the votes we gathered, the people who spoke up. I think about the fact that I almost gave up and moved out, but I did not. I stayed. I fought. And I won. A month later, I get an email from the management company. The HOA board is holding a special election to fill 3 open seats. One of them is the treasurer position Joan left vacant. I do not run. I have done enough. But I vote, and I encourage everyone I know to vote. The woman who said she wanted to run wins by a landslide. So do the other 2 candidates who campaigned on transparency and fairness. The new board takes over in June. Their first meeting is open to all members. I attend. The new treasurer presents a budget that includes line-item explanations for every expense. The new president announces that all enforcement actions will now be posted on the portal with anonymized case numbers so members can see how rules are being applied. The new vice president proposes a quarterly town hall where members can ask questions and raise concerns. All 3 motions pass unanimously. I leave the meeting feeling something I have not felt in a long time. Hope. By the end of summer, the neighborhood feels different. People are talking to each other again. There are cookouts and block parties. Kids are playing in the common areas. The pool is open and busy. The mailboxes are full of newsletters and event flyers instead of violation notices. I see my neighbors at the grocery store, at the gas station, at the park, and we wave. We say hello. We ask how things are going. It is not perfect. There are still complaints. There are still disagreements. But they are handled with conversations instead of threats, with process instead of power, with fairness instead of fear. One evening in August, I am walking back from the mailbox when I see a bag of sand sitting by the curb. It is the same kind Joan used to mark violation zones last winter. The logo is blurred by dirt and wear, but I recognize it. Someone must have left it there after the spring cleanup. I pick it up and toss it in the trash bin. It does not mean anything. It is just a bag of sand. But for a moment, I think about how much that bag represented last winter. The arbitrary enforcement. The constant surveillance. The feeling that I was being hunted for doing nothing wrong. I close the lid on the trash bin and walk back to my unit. The bag is gone. Joan is gone. The old system is gone. And I am still here. In September, I get a letter from the court. It is a final dismissal of Joan's defamation suit. The judge ruled that her claims were baseless and awarded me sanctions to cover my legal fees. The check arrives 2 weeks later. It is not much, but it is something. I deposit it and move on. By October, I have been in the neighborhood for almost a year. The leaves are turning. The air is getting cold again. I know winter is coming. I know the snow will return. But this time, I am ready. I have a new shovel. I have a bag of salt. I have the enforcement policy printed and filed. I have Eric's number saved. I have the attorney on speed dial. And I have the knowledge that I can fight back if I need to. But I do not think I will need to. The HOA board is different now. The rules are clear. The process is fair. And Joan is gone. One morning in late October, I am getting ready for work when I hear a knock on my door. I open it and see the new board president standing there. She is holding a folder. She smiles and hands it to me. I wanted to give you this in person. It is the final draft of the enforcement policy. We are sending it to all members today, but I wanted you to have a copy first. You helped make this happen. I take the folder and thank her. She tells me the board is also planning to add a section to the website where members can submit anonymous feedback about enforcement actions. She says they want to make sure everyone feels heard. I tell her that sounds like a good idea. She thanks me again and leaves. I open the folder and read through the policy. It is everything we talked about in the committee meetings: clear procedures, required hearings, neutral appeals, harassment protections. It is not perfect, but it is fair. And that is all I ever wanted. That night, I sit down and write an email to everyone who helped during the fight. I thank them for speaking up, for sharing their stories, for voting, for showing up. I tell them the policy is done, and the board is committed to following it. I tell them we did something good. I hit send and close my laptop. Then I pour a drink and step out onto my patio. The air is cold and sharp. The stars are bright. The neighborhood is quiet. I think about the year I have had, the fear and the anger and the stress, the courthouse hallways and the certified letters, the small claims, hearing where the judge dismissed Joan's claims, the injunction hearing where the judge denied her stall tactic, the mailbox confrontation where the deputy stepped in, the special membership meeting where 31 people voted to adopt a fair enforcement policy, the moment Joan finally left and the neighborhood started to heal. I think about the statute citation read into the minutes that shut the threat down, the freeze on enforcement pending a policy rewrite, and the written warning Joan got for harassment behavior. I think about the doorbell video that played and proved Joan was lying when she claimed she never came by to scope out violations. I think about how all of it added up to something bigger than any one fight. It was not just about snow piles or pathway widths or clipboards. It was about standing up to someone who abused their power and refusing to let them win. The winter comes back. The snow falls. The plows push it to the curb. I shovel my driveway and salt my steps. I move the snow to the approved area behind my unit. I measure my pathways to make sure they are wide enough. I follow the rules because the rules are fair now. And when I check my mailbox, there are no violation notices. There are no demand letters. There are no threats, just catalogs and bills, and the occasional newsletter from the new board. It is boring. It is normal. It is exactly what it should be. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you being here.